guys, this is Faye with Lost and Wandering, and I'm going to be defining my tradition, and labeling my practice, I guess, essentially, as best as I possibly can. So, I am having the hardest time not getting off on like these tangents about cultural importance and things like that, because culture is the majority of the reason why I even like my hereditary cultures are the reason why I am a pagan at all. First did my research. I mean, I had no intention of actually taking part in it. I was doing research for a book when I first started doing research on paganism and witchcraft. When you do that, when you do research on witchcraft and paganism, you start to see if you have like, and also I had like a basis of most cultures' mythologies, or not most, but like major cultures' mythologies, or major, widely spread mythologies that are very popular for different cultures. I had a basis of knowledge there, like as far as Roman, Greek, and Celtic, Norse, the ones that you kind of get down very easily. Egyptian, the lists kind of could go on, but those mythologies I kind of already had a basis of knowledge in, as well as the day-to-day life of most of those cultures. So when I was doing my research on paganism, modern-day paganism, Wicca, witchcraft, and everything in between, it really didn't look like a religion to me. It looked like a culture that you get to choose. But yeah, so I immediately saw those connections. It was a culture to me. It wasn't a religion. And as an American raised with many cultures and yet without any culture, I kind of strove for some sort of unification of hereditary cultures. That's how I'm going to define it. I don't know another way to say it. But I basically started doing a lot of research in my family history and the different cultures that I was raised in. So from a very young age, my father continuously would say, oh, well, we're part Cherokee, like it was a source of pride for him that he has that cultural connection. And so I was sort of raised, as far as like my interactions with my father goes, with a healthy respect for that culture, as well as a sort of inactive indoctrination of that culture as well. There were a lot of, like, I would have conversations with my dad, and he would talk to me about willow bark. I have migraines all the time, so every time I had a migraine or a headache or something hurt, he said take some aspirin. It's developed from willow bark, which Native American, like, it was like a whole conversation about it. Always, not always, but like in this situation, like there was a lot of herbal like lore inadvertently imparted on me, because it was important to him. But it was very inadvertent in that I don't think that he really wanted me to take the path that I have, but it was important to him that those connections be made, that we are part Native American. We need to respect that part of ourselves. It's very important, and you can learn a lot from that culture. Well, as time's gone on, like, I'm also heavily Germanic Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Norse. I'm very heavily European in general. Slavic, you name it, I've got it in me somewhere. As far as Europe goes. Barring, like, Spain and Italy, as far as I know. I've probably got it. If you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, though, you could probably say we're technically all everything, because we're all from the Tigris and Euphrates plain, the, like, in between that, those two rivers. That's where we're all from. So the only real difference is the cultures that have evolved from that one main, very Paleolithic and primitive cultures, and how they've evolved having been separated from each other for a long period of time. The only other differences is that of skin tone, hair color, eye color, things like that. How we've evolved physically. So how we've evolved culturally and how we've evolved physically is really the only difference. We can all trace it back to one place. But it's really kind of cool to see how widespread some of our cultures are. And in my case, it's very widespread. So I recently, like a few years ago, my grandmother told me that her mother at one point in her life told her that her father was a gypsy. Because her mother, my great-grandmother's mother, was Native American. But then she changed her mind, and she switched it around and said, no, he was actually Native American. Well, she did that a lot. But towards the end of her life, this previous year, in this last March, she started to come out with a lot of truths. Like, a lot of my grandmother's sisters aren't actually her biological sisters. My grandmother ran away from her family at the young age of 15. It was the Great Depression. She picked up a bunch of kids and took care of them. She just became a caretaker. She became a mother at a very young age. And then she had some of her own kids as well, which my grandmother was hereditarily and biologically her child. But a lot of her siblings weren't actually related to her because her grandmother just picked them up and, like, she picked up lost, unwanted children and took care of them in the Great Depression. I don't know how badass your grandparents are, but mine's pretty badass, and I'm very proud to call her my grandmother. But she came out with she wasn't perfect. She obviously lied a lot. She obviously felt a great deal of shame of where she came from. And she obviously didn't feel a great shame in being Native American because she never denied her mother's heritage. However, she did deny, first she was honest and said that her father was Romani, that he was a gypsy, that he was Sinti. And then she changed her mind. No, he was Native American. I'm 100% Native American. But as it turns out, like, on her deathbed, she finally fessed up. She fessed up about a lot of things, but that was the major one for me. And it just opened what I felt was, like, a lot of understanding of how I was raised, who I am, because in the cultures that we are raised in now are impacted directly by the cultures that we come from. They become very diluted as time goes on, but it's just very important to me that I resurge those cultures in my own family that I may or may not have in the future. It's just very important to me that I carry on those cultures, because if I don't do it, no one else will. I really want those traditions to be passed on, and I want them to be important to my children, and I hope that they're important to my grandchildren as well. I don't know. We'll see. But, so there was a lot of, like, opening up about that. And then this year, a few weeks ago, my mother was looking through the family tree on her mother's side. She was looking through this family tree on her mother's side, which dates back to Lady Godiva. Like, I am a direct descendant of Lady Godiva. And it goes back even further than that. But that's just the most notable figure. But what she found is that we have a Chinese ancestor. And so I want to embrace that aspect as well. As I'm finding out a lot of the different cultures that have indirectly impacted my life, I really, really want to take the good from those cultures and pass them on to my children. I think it's very important. It's very important to me. So, that being said, that's kind of how I'm defining my practice. Because spirituality and my family history are very, very important. Those are two things that I get very passionate about, and I could research all day. And I would continue to find new things, and I am a family history junkie. I am a research junkie. I have an addiction to finding out new things about myself. Not that they define who I am, but the fact that that's important to me does define who I am. And so I can't do anything but incorporate what I learn into my own life. That's just what's important to me. So as I am doing these things, like I've bought a book on Romani cultures and religions and spiritual practices. It's a fucking cool book. Hold on, I'll go get it. So this book is called Gypsy Demons and Divinities, The Magic and Religion of the Gypsies. Obviously that's not PC to say gypsies anymore, but it was written by a Gorger, Gaji, Gorgio is what she calls herself. So it's not entirely accurate. However, I do see a lot of Romani testimonies on the internet that correspond very much with a lot of the things that are in there. And it's been very important to me to have a Romani pantheon. And there's, like, you could really have one. Because they essentially, they're spiritual chameleons of wherever they were. So if they were in Europe, they took on the Christian, or, you know, you get what I'm saying. But they have a whole section on, but they, like, it's cultural. They have funerals, mourning, grave decorations, fear of grave robbers, disposal of properties, mourning taboos, baptism, marriage, divorce, blood brotherhood, coronation, omens of death, death birth. Like, they're very death oriented. They have witches, the evil eye, curses, medical cures, charms, love filters, fortune telling, taboos against women, sexual taboos, food taboos, and theft taboos, ghosts, fairies, devils, the worship of vampire gods, blood sacrifice, the worship of the goddess Bibi, the child strangler, animal and tool worship, the worship of the mountains, sun worship, fire worship, worship of Alako, the moon god, and worship of Kar, the phallic god, Faerun, Del, major world religions, and Christianity. So this thing is chock full of a lot of really juicy shit that I could not have found anywhere on the internet. I love this book. It's from like the 70s, so it's obviously not very PC. It's probably not entirely accurate. I have to fact check a lot of what's in here. However, I wouldn't have known anything about these things to look them up without this book. So I'm going to be looking up the vampire gods. I'm going to be looking up the Romani's history in the worship of all of those things, decide how authentic that is, and at that point decide whether or not to incorporate it into my practice, whether or not it's authentic. But I'm doing a lot of things like that. I'm introducing Feng Shui into my practice as well, a lot of Eastern philosophies. I do kind of see my practice as mostly philosophical. It's got a lot to do with research, how that research affects what I believe, and then how I practice. So I practice a religion that's very all-encompassing in all these things. That being said, how I label myself, it becomes very complicated at that point. I recently learned that Romani witches are called Chovihanis. Very similar to the, I think it's Cavandera of Mexico. They're women that's typical. They usually have one in every tribe. She's like a medicine woman, but she don't want to get on her bad side because she'll curse your ass. She's very powerful. They're enigmas in and of themselves. So, learning a lot of stuff about that. Because I know so much already, just in our culture, they put a lot of emphasis, or in American culture, white bread American culture, they put a lot of emphasis on Celtic, Norse, and otherwise Germanic traditions, pantheons, etc. They also put a lot of emphasis on Greek and Roman traditions and pantheons, as well as Egyptian. In some cases, Assyrian and otherwise Middle Eastern, but mostly the most popular pantheon and tradition is the Greek and Roman tradition, but and then and then it's like the Celtic and Germanic and Norse, and then Egyptian, but they're all very, very, very popular among the pagan community. There's a lot of information out there. I want to get the information on the very little known facts first. That's kind of where I'm coming at. So, as far as labeling, I'm probably going to adopt the label of Chovihani. I call myself a witch. As far as tradition goes, I recently looked up, hold on, let me look it up. I'm going to post this link below, but hold on, let me find it. So it's www.wildwitchacademy.com, and this is under the / different types of witchcraft HTML, and they have a lot of information on different types of witchcraft. They've got Alexandrian and then Wicca. It's like Alexandrian Wicca, British traditional Wicca, Celtic Wicca, Caledonian, and then it goes down to different types of witches. So I don't really have, as far as different types of Wiccan or natural witches, I don't identify with really any of those. Other than solitary, and I identify as a solitary natural witch. It says solitary witches can be practitioners of nearly any magical system. A solitary works alone and does not join a group or coven. Often solitaries choose to mix different systems, much like an eclectic witch, which I also kind of identify as. Solitaries can also form their own religious beliefs, as they are not bound by the rules of a coven. So, I like the freedom of that. But I also identify as kind of as a fairy witch. I have not actively communed with fairy folk, but I want to incorporate that in my practice very soon. So I want to eventually blanket my label of witchcraft tradition as wild witchery. They're usually hereditary witches and will work on their own, they're solitary, or in family groups, similar to, but not as strict in guidelines as a coven. They are healers using things of the earth to do their healing, including crystals, herbs, oils, and potions. They do not usually worship any deities, but worship the earth and the moon. I probably identify mostly with that at this moment. Wild witches are not Wiccan. In fact, wild witchery is much older than Wicca. But since the days of old, wild witches have worked within the villages to heal illnesses of the body and the mind and perform midwifery. They do not believe in harming anyone or anything. Most wild witches will share their homes not only with pets, but also wildlife and native animals. They tend to live in the country. In a perfect world, this is exactly what I would want. When I read this, I said, this is who I want to be. This is who I am. This is who I I am on the inside. How can I make that my reality? I really want that. So I identify myself as a wild witch, even though technically speaking, I'm not living that tradition at this moment. I live in a apartment, 3rd floor apartment, in Austin, Texas, a major city. So, but I've wanted to move to Colorado since I was like 6. So, and that's where my father's from. But that is how I would define my practice, hands down, is wild witchery. I'll put the link down below. You might find it very useful if you don't have a definition for your craft, for your tradition. You might find it on this list. It's very, very interesting and very informative, and it was immensely helpful for me. It also has, it's specifically geared towards wild witches. I don't know how I found it. I think I just looked up witchcraft traditions because I was looking for a way to define it. I just think, I don't know what my point is, but basically that's how I define my practice. That's why culture is important to me. My hereditary culture, my hereditary lineage, my traditions that I would like to incorporate, they're all very important to me. And I am moving at a snail's pace, but as fast as I possibly can, towards my goal of becoming a fully on one side of the fence wild witch. I want to live out in the country. If I could, I would. I at one point in my life, I almost took a medical route because I wanted to become a midwife. It was very important to me at one point in my life to learn a lot of medicinal herbs and their uses, and because it was more important to me to learn the medicinal uses than the magical uses when I was looking up, or when I was doing that research. Unfortunately, I lost that research. But I do have the magical herb properties, but it's still very important to me to this day to learn the medicinal properties as well. I don't think I will be providing my services publicly because there's a lot of regulation involved and whatever, but I will do what I can as far as medicinally with my family. Not excluding, obviously if it's really important and I'm out of my depth, I'll obviously take them to the doctor. I'm not an idiot, but those things are very important to me, and they've always been important to me. And now I have a label, and now I have other goals to reach. Labels in some ways can be a bad thing, but when you find something that you want to strive to be, reach for it. It's the best feeling in the world, finding something to reach for, and that's what I'm reaching for. So long story short, I identify myself as a Chovihani wild witch. So that may change. I will update you guys, I guess. But that's how I'm defining my tradition and my practice. So thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you liked it. I have a lot of other videos. Please visit my channel and check out anything else. If you didn't like this video, there might be something else. Please comment. Today I got a comment that said I want to do a video response to one of my videos, and I was like, go for it. I've not gotten any input from anybody, but I really want to hear from you guys. So please comment, and please tell me if I'm full of shit. I don't even care at this point. Just tell me. But yeah, so thank you for watching. I love you guys so much. And if I really want to get nitty gritty about it, my grandmother is very much like me. She's very universalist. She's very witchy. If I told her today that I was a witch, she would probably throw me a party. She is the only person in my family that I could probably say that about. First she'd question me a lot, but she would be so proud. She's the only person in my family that I know 100% would be absolutely proud of me for my choice in what I believed. Ooh, my cat just licked my leg. Sorry, she loves me, but that really surprised me. She's under my skirt. Lol. Anyways.